In 1986, Oldsmobile built 4,273 Oldsmobile Cutlass 442s. And 40 years later, we've got one. But when this car arrived here at Etches, it wasn't running, it wasn't clean, and it definitely wasn't ready for the road. What started out as a light restoration quickly became something much bigger. Over the last 5 months, we've torn this car apart, rebuilt countless components, refinished parts, solved problem after problem, and made decisions that would completely change the direction of the build. One of the biggest challenges we had was the engine. We wanted to preserve as much of the original car as possible, but sometimes a project just tells you what it needs. And in this case, that meant saying goodbye to the original power plant and moving forward with an LS swap. This isn't a factory restoration. This is our vision of what modernizing a 1986 Oldsmobile Cutlass 442 can be. A resto mod that respects the car's heritage while giving it a completely new life. In this video, we're looking back at everything that happened so far, from where this project began to the major milestones, setbacks, and progress that brought us to where it stands today. This is the story of our 1986 Oldsmobile Cutlass 442 restoration. Let's take it back to the beginning. The car had been sitting for about 5 years. Garage kept most of its life, but time still caught up with it. On the surface, it wasn't actually in bad shape. The paint, this awesome blue over silver, still holding up decently considering its age. The blue interior still beautifully intact. Even the original radio was there. No cracks in the dash. And with just over 115,000 miles, it was clear the car lived most of its life without being completely torn apart or neglected. Frankly, one of the things that really attracted us to the car is that there was a huge owner's manual of everything that the owner did to this car along the way. But even with that, there was one major issue that we had, and that was that the car didn't run. And once we started digging into it, we pretty quickly found out why. Wiring, heavily destroyed over the years. Rodents gotten into it. Harness was destroyed, at least a good portion of it anyway. So before anything else, we had to figure out how to even get the car to fire. The plan was simple, like, let's just get this thing to start and see what happens. We began working on the ignition system, swapping out the original distributor setup for an older HEI, until that didn't really rely on the factory computer command because all the wiring was messed up. The idea was simplify everything just enough to get it running so that we could start to kind of assess the wiring and fix what we had to fix. Once the swap was done, we rechecked everything, went over the basics, and prepared for the first start attempt. And then when we try to bring it back to life, nothing. We tried again.
Try it.
And again, still nothing. Multiple attempts, but the engine, it just refused to fire. And just like that, reality set in. This wasn't going to be that quick fix or a simple revival that we hoped it was going to be. It was going to be much bigger, a full rebuild, and that's really where this journey began. After we couldn't get the engine to fire, the next step was to go into cleaning and just simplifying everything. Engine bay was in pretty rough shape. Looks pretty good right now, but it was in pretty rough shape. Years of dirt, grime, carbon buildup, damaged wiring from the rodents had left it in a state that would even be hard to trust. And we build these cars for us to enjoy and others to enjoy. We didn't want to have it fail on us. We used degreasers. We broke down as much buildup as possible and pressure washed the entire engine bay. It wasn't perfect when we were done, but it was a massive improvement from where we started. At least now we can clearly see what we were working on. And once everything was dried off, we moved on to the next idea. Maybe it wasn't just the ignition, maybe it was fuel delivery. So we tried a carburetor swap. We ordered an Edelbrock 1406, thinking this might finally be the key to get our engine to run. Once it arrived, we installed it. We used the proper spacers and setup and tried to get everything aligned, but then we ran into another problem. Even with everything in place, the throttle linkage was still hitting the intake. It wasn't a tuning issue, it was a fitment issue, and at this point, we really had a choice to make. We could keep chasing the fixes, we could swap the intake, adjust more parts, keep spending money and time trying to make the original setup work. But by the time we priced everything out, it didn't really make sense anymore. A carb, intake, linkage adjustments, we're already getting close to the cost of something completely different. And that's when the direction of the build changed. We decided to return the carb setup and even the distributor as well. Because at that point, we weren't just trying to revive the original engine anymore. We were trying to build something that made sense, something reliable, something modern. And that's when we made the decision, we're gonna do a full LS swap. Once we made the decision to go full LS swap, there was no turning back. The next question was simple. What engine are we going to use? We sourced a 5.3 liter LS from a 2005 Chevy Suburban. It had about 100,000 miles on it, was completely stock, and most importantly, we were able to hear it run and it sounded incredibly healthy. But before putting it into the car, we wanted to know exactly what we had. So we tore into it. The goal wasn't to completely rebuild the engine, it was to inspect it, verify its condition, and make sure we were starting with a solid foundation for the project. Fortunately, what we found gave us confidence moving forward. With the new power plant chosen, it was finally time for the engine to come out. After years under the hood of this 442, the old engine journey was coming to an end. And just like that, the engine bay was empty. For the first time since arriving at Etches, the car was one major step closer to becoming something entirely different. Before installation, we wanted the LS to look as good as it would perform. The engine was laser clean to remove years of grime and buildup, bringing the surface back to life and revealing clean metal underneath. Once the cleaning process was complete, we moved on to finishing. The engine and transmission were both treated to a custom Cerakoted gold finish, giving the drivetrain a look that matched the vision we had for the build to begin with. This wasn't about making the car run, it was about building something we'd be proud to open the hood on. Then came one of the biggest milestones of the entire project, the installation. After weeks of planning, prepping, cleaning, and parts gathering, the LS and transmission finally found their new home inside the Cutlass. She's in. Makes all the difference in the world. For the first time, the vision was starting to become reality. But the drivetrain was only one piece of the puzzle. With the engine in place, our attention shifted to the rest of the car. The steering and suspension systems were disassembled and inspected, making way for the next phase of the restoration. And as we continued digging deeper, we discovered that the rodents hadn't stopped at the engine wiring. The air conditioning system had also been heavily damaged. Then came the center console. What we hoped would be a straightforward cleanup quickly turned into another unexpected challenge. At this point, it felt like every area of the car had a story to tell. Some good, some not so good. But that's what bringing a project like this back to life is about. Most recently, our attention turned to the fuel system. The fuel tank was removed and inspected and updated with a new Holley sending unit to support the direction of the build moving forward. And that's where the project stands today. 5 months after bringing home one of 4,273 1986 Cutlass 442s ever built, the transformation is now well underway. The car isn't finished, there's still plenty of work ahead, but compared to the non-running car that first arrived in our shop, the progress speaks for itself. And just like that, we're standing at the edge of the moment we've been working towards since day one. Months of late nights, unexpected setbacks, hard decisions, and countless hours in the shop have all led to here, to the moment this Cutlass gets a second chance at life. The LS swap is nearly complete, and soon we'll finally turn the key and find out if everything we've poured into this car was worth it. Then comes the part you can't predict. The miles, the testing, the adjustments, and the lessons that only the road can teach. Every build reaches a point where you stop planning and start believing. What happens after that is still unwritten. Maybe this Cutlass finds a new home and helps fund the next dream. Maybe it stays with us a little longer and gets a paint and finish it truly deserves. But one thing is certain, the car has already become more than just a project. It's a reminder of why we do this. Not just to restore old cars, but to create new memories and share the entire journey, the victories, the failures, and everything in between. Because while this chapter may be coming to an end, the road ahead is just getting started. And if there's one thing we learned through this build, it's that the best stories don't end when the engine starts. That's where they begin.